Hi, this is Martin in the Negotiation Dojo. Welcome this week. And in the dojo, we communicate our needs to the world using influence, persuasion, and negotiation. And this week, I do want to talk about a new study from MIT, fairly new, it was released in March, about the informal negotiation. The word these researchers used is latent negotiation, where they say that's what moves the negotiation more than anything. And a new way, actually, of thinking about how you actually are successful in a negotiation. And let me tell you what that's about. When we think about negotiation, we talk about you see the interaction, and maybe acrimonious, maybe visual, the haggle, if you will. But the majority of deals are actually done and below the surface. They're done in a very informal way. They're done very subtly. Think of it almost as an iceberg, where on the top looks pretty pristine. You see a little bit of ice coming out of the water, but below is where, first of all, the mass is of the ice, and second, it's where all the action is. And that's what they talk about, this idea of the latent negotiation, which is not done in the formal uh, table, face to face, head to head negotiation. What they talk about is this idea of how written communication, email, Slack channels, everything else really undermines from a meaningful accord. They talk about, and I've talked about quite a bit on this channel about how face-to-face negotiations is where things are done, but they have a whole new take on that face-to-face negotiation, not the formal negotiation face-to-face. They're talking about the maybe baby negotiations, the relationships we have, how we test out ideas for that negotiation uh, off channel. I was counsel to a Fortune 100 company and external, and there were so many ways to communicate, Slack channels, emails. They had some inner sanctum emails, some of which I had access to, some of which I didn't. And what this made is a very interesting inability to effectively, I thought, in my opinion, uh, have the whole team interact with one another. I mean, the first negotiation you do is with your own team, make sure everyone's on board before we could go across the table. And I found that really instructive. And this study, a few months old here, basically uh, makes me think that, hey, this was a little bit dysfunctional. There were too many channels where people can communicate about a single deal, getting on one platform or no platform, as this study says, and maybe grabbing coffee in the cafeteria would have been the most effective. Uh, so, if there are three, I guess, parts or formulaic parts on this MIT study, then this was MIT Sloan School, their negotiation journal magazine. I'll put a link in the comments to the study. First, it's one on one. Second, it relies on an ongoing relationship. It has to do with relationship development. Second, in that relationship, it's not passive, it's indirect, what I'll call indirect framing. You don't want to, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee at the coffee house and we're going to talk about the deal right away. No, it's like, oh, well, I have this problem. What do you think about this? And have your negotiation counterpart um, almost figure out what they're thinking or what would work and what wouldn't. Because the quicker you can vent those, what would work and what wouldn't, the closer you are to getting an issue, rather than saying, give me a 10% discount, say, hey, how could we meet our budget, giving our, CapEx is this week, and we have these other things coming up on your product, which would be a real integral part of that. How could we make that work? So this is the indirect question that we talk about in the research in my book, 161 Negotiations, open-ended question. But we also want to think about when the signs are off? What are the warning signs on this idea of um, the latent negotiation? When is the latent negotiation, the negotiation that's not at the table, going off bounds? One thing is the idea of a large amount of written communication generally works against this accord being uh, um, consummated. As counsel, I will always try to talk to the opposition, and sometimes that won't happen. But you want more than just a bunch of demand letters back and forth and emails. You just want to have a lingua franca type of discussion. And if it's all written communication, the probability your latent negotiation will not work for you is higher. The second thing is this idea of asymmetry. We have one very powerful, one very weak position. Um, the latent negotiation probably won't work because you may not just have that type of access to that person. So there has to be a certain amount of peer review. If you are in an asymmetric negotiation, then the method that works is the formal negotiation, and we absolutely teach that in the negotiation dojo. And a blind spot, I think, in this MIT study is if people will not engage at all. If they have an opinion of they're do something, it's very acrimonious, it's very combative, and they will not engage on any other level than give demands. Those are very difficult. In that case, you probably need an intermediary, whether it be legal counsel, a mediator, arbitrator, or a judge. Those are problems when people just won't talk. Maybe there's a lot of emotion involved when um, they are not engaging. They are not engaging in something that has to happen. Um, so, what are some of uh, the things that we can use when we're trying to foment this idea of the latent negotiation? One is shift the venue, not at the negotiation table, maybe not even work, maybe at a coffee house, maybe doing something very much that is a pattern interrupt. So you can kind of figure out what the contours of a potential accord can be. You generally want to do that not in a formal environment, and again, face to face. Second, hypothetical language, open-ended question. And third, um, a line before the event is what the researchers say. In the negotiation dojo, in our class, we have this, we say prepare. And there's an 8-step process we use, or checklist, if you will, on how to prepare for most negotiations. And that's what you have to do. You just have to prepare. There's so much research that says the negotiation is not one at the table, it's one in preparation. The Kellogg School has a professor who emphasizes this as well, and we teach that in the course. So the old playbook in this concept of negotiation is some type of formality with, but this new study says uh, very clearly that these accords happen with the latent negotiation. It happens not at the table. It is a face-to-face interaction with your opponent, trying to figure out what the possibilities are, and not a full breakdown of all the data and all the spreadsheets before you get there. It's very much impacted by the ability of people to get information before and develop maybe a little rapport, although the study doesn't use that word. So that's what I have in this week's Negotiation Dojo. Thank you for joining us. We are, of course, we're having the monthly classes. If you want to sign up, there'll be a link. Please subscribe to this channel. And if you are a Negotiation Dojo graduate, or if you are at a high level, we are actually having a kind of master's class that starts September 10th, 2026. So if you want to sign up for that, why don't you give me a private message, or reach out to our team in the Persuasion Lab. Thank you for joining us, and have a winning negotiation.